I opened my eyes to the sting of cheap tallow smoke and the ache of a body that had not yet known the weight of years. My hands flew to my face. Smooth skin unlined. My fingers unblemished by calluses and the sores of exile. I had died in a ditch, my name spat upon, my bones left for the crows. And now I was back. Back in the servants' quarters of the Jing Manor, back in my 18th year, back on the very morning my world had begun to crumble. The memory of that day was seared into my soul. I had been summoned to my husband's study. Li Chen had stood before me, his handsome face twisted with panic, and I had believed him. I had believed his lies, his accusations, his desperate pleas for help. I had sacrificed every last shred of my family's influence to save him from the political firestorm he had created, only for him to turn around and blame me for his own ruin. He had cast me out, stripped me of my titles, and left me to die in a frozen ditch, forgotten and alone. But the gods had given me a second chance. The shouting in the courtyard confirmed it. That voice, high, frantic, laced with the venom of a cornered animal, was unmistakable. It was Li Chen. And the words he screamed were the same ones that had set my doom in motion. Find her. I saw her with my own eyes. Consort Lu has betrayed me. She is a spy for the Empress Dowager's faction. Her family will pay for this treachery. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was the moment. The accusation that had started it all. In my past life, I had rushed to his side, my love blinding me to his scheming. I had used my father's name, my mother's connections, every scrap of goodwill I possessed to protect him. And he had repaid me by branding me a traitor. This time, I would not make the same mistake. The heavy oak door of my tiny room burst open. Li Chen stood in the doorway, his eyes wild, his robes disheveled. He looked younger, his shoulders less stooped, but the cruelty lurking behind his handsome features was the same. The man I had loved was a ghost. The man before me was a monster wearing his skin. He barked, jabbing a finger at me. I need you to go to Minister Zhou. Now. Tell him I need his support. Tell him to speak to the Grand Secretary on my behalf. Consort Lu is spreading lies about me, and I will not be silenced. Use your influence. Use whatever is left of your family's name. Do you understand? In my past life, I had nodded. I had stammered promises. I had groveled and pleaded and humiliated myself for his sake. But that woman was dead. The woman who now stood before him had felt the cold of that ditch, had tasted the bitterness of betrayal, had watched her own life drain away while he celebrated his freedom in the capital. No, I said. The word hung in the air between us, sharp and foreign. Li Chen's face froze. For a moment, he looked almost comical, his mouth hanging open, his eyes wide with disbelief. He had never heard me refuse him. Not once in 3 years of marriage. What did you say to me? His voice was low, dangerous. I said no, I repeated, stepping forward. My legs felt weak, but I forced them to hold me. I will not go to Minister Zhou. I will not lift a finger to save your reputation. You made your bed, Li Chen. Now lie in it. He crossed the room in 2 swift strides, his hand clamping around my wrist. His grip was bruising, his fingers digging into my flesh with a violence I remembered all too well. In my past life, this had been the beginning of his abuse. The first strike, the first broken bone, the first time I had learned to fear him. You ungrateful wretch, he hissed, his face inches from mine. Without me, you're nothing. A pauper's daughter. A merchant's brat. I made you a lady. I gave you status, wealth, a place in society. And this is how you repay me, and I made you a minister. I shot back, the words tearing from my throat like a confession I had held for too long. The appointment in the Ministry of Rights was my father's last favor. The marriage alliance with the Southern merchants my negotiation. Every success you've ever had was built on my family's name and my efforts. And you have repaid me by humiliating me in public, squandering our fortune on courtesans and gambling, and blaming me for your own incompetence. His face drained of color, then flushed an ugly, mottled red. He released my wrist only to raise his hand, his palm open, aimed at my cheek. The strike was coming. I had felt it 100 times before. Do it, I said, stepping closer to him, my chin raised in defiance. Strike me. Throw me out. I would rather die a beggar on the street than live another day as your fool. I will not feed your ambition anymore, Li Chen. You are an empty husk. A man with no talent, no spine, and no heart. I am done. His hand trembled in the air. The threat of violence had always worked before, a simple, effective tool to cow me into submission. But I was not the same woman. The shock on his face was more satisfying than any revenge I had ever dreamed of. He could not understand the change. He saw the same face, the same body, but the spirit within was forged in the fires of a lifetime of suffering and a death of utter despair. He dropped his hand. The frantic energy that had propelled him was replaced by something colder, more calculating. Very well, he said, his voice flat. You have chosen your side. Remember this day, wife. When I am powerful and you are groveling for a single copper coin, remember that I gave you a chance to stand by me. Remember that you threw it away. He spun on his heel and strode out, leaving the door wide open. I stared at the empty doorway, my body trembling with the force of the confrontation. My wrist was already bruising, but the pain felt distant. It was the pain of victory. I had changed the first thread in the tapestry of my fate. In my past life, this was the day I had sacrificed everything to defend him. This time, I had done nothing, and already the weight of my old life felt a little lighter. But I knew Li Chen. His pride was a monstrous, wounded beast. He would not let this slight pass. He would try to destroy me, to make my life a living hell until I begged for his forgiveness. And I had no illusions about my position. My father was dead. My mother was a recluse in a temple. I had no powerful brothers, no allies at court. The only weapons I possessed were the bitter knowledge of the future and a heart that was no longer capable of love for the man who had destroyed me. I had to act fast. I had to anticipate his next move. In my past life, he had planted a forged ledger in my belongings, accusing me of embezzling household funds. It was the final nail in my coffin, the evidence that had sealed my exile. But I knew where that ledger really was, tucked away in his private study, hidden among his own records of corruption. If I could find it first, I could turn his weapon against him. I found Lin Hua in the kitchen garden, her fingers stained with dirt, her cheeks full and her eyes bright. She was the only soul in that house who had ever shown me kindness, and in my past life, she had died by my side in exile, her body failing long before mine. The sight of her alive, whole, untouched by the suffering to come, nearly broke me. Huar, I said, my voice catching. She looked up, her face breaking into a wide smile. My lady, you are up early. I was just about to bring you tea. Leave it, I said, taking her by the arm. I need your help. And I need you to trust me. What I am about to tell you will sound like madness, but I swear to you, it is the truth. I told her everything. I told her of the exile, of the death, of my rebirth. I told her what Li Chen was planning to do to retaliate against me, to frame me for theft and have me arrested. I told her about the ledger, the secret record of his bribes and misdeeds, which he would eventually plant in my belongings to ruin me. Huar listened, her face a pale mask of horror. When I finished, she did not recoil. She did not call me insane. Instead, she leaned in close and said, "How do we stop him?" The boldness of her question gave me strength. "We find that ledger before he can use it against me," I said. "And we use it to protect ourselves." That night, under the cover of darkness, we moved like shadows through the manor. The household accounts were kept in Li Chen's private study, a room I was forbidden from entering. But Huar knew the patterns of the servants. She knew when the librarian left to visit his mistress and when the janitor took his afternoon nap. The study was a disaster of paper and scrolls, a chaotic testament to a man who valued appearance over order. My fingers flew over ledgers, letters, and official documents. My heart pounded in my ears, every creak of the floorboards sending a jolt of terror through my chest. It took nearly an hour, but I found it. A small, nondescript journal with a worn leather cover. The first page had a list of names, officials he had bribed, merchants he had cheated, payments he had skimmed from the state treasury. It was a treasure trove of his misdeeds. I tucked it into my sleeve, my hands shaking. And then I heard the floorboard creak in the hallway. I froze. Huar pressed herself against the wall, her eyes wide. The footsteps grew louder, accompanied by the low murmur of voices. Li Chen's voice. And the voice of his chief steward, Zhang, a weasel-faced man who had always despised me. This way, my lord, Zhang whispered. The papers you requested are in the study. There was no time to flee. Huar and I dove behind a large screen in the corner of the room, pressing ourselves against the cold wood. The door opened, and the two men stumbled in, reeking of wine. The bitch, Li Chen slurred, collapsing into his chair. She refused me. She refused me in front of the servants. I will destroy her. I will have her thrown into the street like common trash. First, I need to find that ledger. Wait until she tries to claim I wronged her. I'll bury her with her own signature. My blood turned to ice. He was already preparing the trap. The ledger I had just stolen was his weapon, and he had no idea I had taken it. But I was trapped in the very room where his scheme was being hatched. If he discovered me, if he realized what I had done, the game would be over before it had truly begun. My lord, Zhang said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. We should not wait. The accusation against Consort Lu is gaining traction. If we are to deflect the blame, we must make a sacrifice. Your wife is the perfect victim. Everyone knows she is a jealous shrew. We say she planted the rumors to ruin the consort, hoping to curry favor with the Empress Dowager's faction. It is believable. Li Chen laughed, a cruel, greedy sound. Yes, yes. The Empress Dowager's faction. It is perfect. They will be so eager to believe it. I will have her arrested tonight. I will have her stripped of her titles. And I will make sure she spends the rest of her life in a prison of silence. The scandal will consume her, and I will emerge a victim, a husband betrayed by his own wife. I pressed my hand to my mouth, stifling the scream that clawed at my throat. The man I had married, the man I had loved, was plotting my destruction with the same callousness he might use to discard a worn-out pair of shoes. But I was not the same woman. I was a survivor. I clutched the ledger in my sleeve, its weight a comfort against my skin. I had the means to fight back. I had the means to destroy him. But I knew that confronting him directly would only invite more violence. I needed a different strategy. I needed allies. I needed a future beyond the walls of this prison. As the men continued their plotting, I made my own plan. This time, I would not be his victim. This time, I would be his nemesis. The hunt had just begun, and the prey was no longer me. The sound of Li Chen's laughter echoed in my ears long after he and Zhang had stumbled out of the study. Huar and I remained frozen behind the screen, our breaths shallow, our bodies trembling. When the footsteps finally faded into silence, I released the breath I had been holding and slumped against the wall. The ledger was still tucked in my sleeve, its presence a burning brand against my skin. We need to leave, Huar whispered, her voice barely audible. Now, before he comes back. I nodded, my legs threatening to give way beneath me. We crept out of the study like thieves, which we were, and made our way through the darkened corridors of the manor. Every shadow seemed to move, every creak of the floorboards a potential betrayal. But we reached my room without incident, and I collapsed onto my bed, the ledger clutched to my chest. I did not sleep that night. I sat in the darkness, turning the pages of the journal by the faint light of a single candle. The names leaped out at me, high-ranking officials, military commanders, even a few members of the imperial household. Li Chen had been busier than I had ever realized. He had built his career not on talent or merit, but on a web of bribes and threats that stretched across the entire capital. The ledger was a map of his corruption, and it was also a weapon of unimaginable power. But power was a double-edged sword. If I used this information recklessly, I would not only destroy Li Chen, I would bring down half the court with him. And the court would not forgive me for it. I needed to be strategic. I needed to find allies who could help me wield this weapon without cutting myself in the process. The first person I thought of was Madame Su. She was the Dowager Countess of a minor but respected house, and her family had been indebted to my mother for a lifetime. In my past life, I had been too proud to seek her help. But I was no longer too proud for anything. Pride had been the luxury of a woman who believed she had a future. I had no such luxury now. I waited until dawn, then dressed in my plainest robes and slipped out of the manor before the household awoke. The streets of the capital were just beginning to stir, merchants opening their stalls and servants fetching water from the wells. I walked quickly, keeping my head down, until I reached the eastern side of the city and the modest but elegant villa of Madame Sue. The servant who answered the door looked at me with suspicion, but I gave him my name and asked to see the Dowager Countess. He hesitated, then disappeared inside. A few minutes later, he returned and led me to a small receiving room. Madame Sue was an old woman with sharp eyes and a will of iron. She was dressed simply but impeccably, her silver hair pulled back in a tight bun. She looked at me with an expression that was equal parts curiosity and wariness. "Lady Jing," she said, gesturing for me to sit. "This is an unexpected visit." "To what do I owe the honor?" I sat across from her, my hands clasped in my lap to hide their trembling. "Dowager Countess, I come to you with a request. I know that my mother once rendered your family a great service. I am not here to collect on that debt out of sentiment. I am here to offer you something in return." Her eyebrows rose. "And what could you possibly offer me? Child, you are a wife with no power, no influence, and, if the rumors are true, no husband willing to speak your name in public." "The rumors are true," I said, my voice steady. "My husband has cast me aside in everything but name. But I am not powerless. I have information that could settle a long-standing dispute between your house and the Wang estate. I know that the rights to the eastern fields were never properly transferred. The original deed is still in the possession of the local magistrate's archives, not in the Wang family's vault. A simple inquiry will prove your claim." Madame Sue's eyes narrowed. She studied me for a long moment, her fingers drumming against the armrest of her chair. "And how would a young wife like you know such a thing?" I met her gaze without flinching. "I have my sources, and I have proven myself to be a woman of my word. Help me, Dowager Countess, and I will help you. I do not ask for much, only a place to stay, a position to work, and protection from my husband's wrath." She leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. "You are asking me to take you in, knowing that it will make an enemy of Li Chen." "I am asking you to take a calculated risk," I said. "Li Chen's power is waning. His accusation against consort Lu has made him enemies in the Empress Dowager's faction. He will not be in a position to retaliate against you, especially if I am useful to you. And I will be useful. I have skills that your household could use: negotiation, diplomacy, accounting. I am not asking for charity. I am asking for a job." Madame Sue was silent for a long time. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her face. "Your mother was a clever woman," she said. "And she raised a clever daughter. I will give you a chance. You will work in my household as a senior secretary, managing my correspondence and estate records. You will have your own chambers and a wage. If your husband comes looking for you, I will tell him that you are in my employ and that you are not to be disturbed. Does that suit you?" I bowed my head, relief flooding through me like a wave. "Thank you, Dowager Countess. You will not regret this." I returned to the Jing Manor that afternoon to gather my belongings. I had few possessions of value, a few pieces of jewelry, a worn-out trunk of clothes, and the leather journal hidden in my sleeve. As I packed, I heard footsteps in the hallway. My heart seized, but it was only Huar, her face pale with worry. "My lady," she said, closing the door behind her. "The servants are talking. Li Chen has sent word to the Ministry of Justice. He is preparing a formal complaint against you." I had expected as much. "What kind of complaint?" "He is accusing you of mismanaging household funds," she said. "He claims you have been embezzling money and selling off family heirlooms. He has witnesses, servants he has bribed to testify against you." I laughed, a cold sound that startled even me. "Of course he does. He is predictable if nothing else. But he is also careless. He does not know that I have already found his ledger. He does not know that I have already made plans." Huara looked at me, her eyes wide. "What are we going to do?" "We are going to leave," I said. "Tonight. Before he can have me arrested. Gather what you need. We are going to Madame Sue's villa, and we are not coming back." But even as I said the words, I knew it would not be that simple. Li Chen was not a man who tolerated defiance. He would not let me walk away without a fight. And I was not the only person he would target. I thought of War, of the other servants who had shown me kindness, of the people who would suffer because of my rebellion. I had to protect them. I had to find a way to neutralize Li Chen before he could harm anyone else. And I had to do it quickly. That evening, as the sun set over the capital, I made my final preparations. I had written a letter to Zhao Wei, the young minister of rights who would, in my past life, become Li Chen's greatest enemy. I had not met him yet, but I knew everything about him, his ambitions, his strategies, his hatred for corruption. I knew that he was already gathering evidence against Li Chen. And I knew that he was looking for an ally. I sent the letter through a trusted messenger, a merchant who owed me a favor from my days as Li Chen's wife. The letter was simple. I claimed to have information about Li Chen's corruption, and I asked for a meeting. I signed it with a false name, knowing that Zhao Wei would be cautious. The messenger returned with an answer the next morning. Zhao Wei agreed to meet me at a temple fair on the outskirts of the capital. He did not know my real identity, and I intended to keep it that way until I was sure I could trust him. I told Huar to stay behind at Madame Su's villa. If something went wrong, I needed her to be safe. I dressed in plain clothes and covered my face with a veil, then made my way to the temple fair. The fair was crowded with merchants and pilgrims, the air thick with the smell of incense and fried food. I pushed through the throng, my heart pounding, until I spotted a man in scholar's robes standing near a lotus pond. He was tall and lean, with sharp features and intelligent eyes that missed nothing. I approached him slowly, keeping my distance. "Minister Zhao," I said, my voice low. He turned to face me, his expression guarded. "You are the one who sent the letter." "I am." "Who are you?" "Someone who knows Li Chen better than you do," I said. "And someone who has the evidence you need to destroy him." His eyes flickered with interest, but he did not let his guard down. "Why should I trust you?" I reached into my sleeve and pulled out a single page from the ledger, a page that listed 3 bribes Li Chen had paid to a senior official in the Ministry of Justice. I held it out to him. "Because this is only the beginning," I said. "I have more. Much more. And I am willing to share it with you on one condition." "What condition?" "You protect me," I said. "You ensure that my name is never mentioned in connection with this evidence. And you ensure that Li Chen never learns that I was the one who brought him down." Zhao Wei studied me for a long moment, his gaze piercing. Then he nodded slowly. "You have my word," he said. "But I want to know one thing. Why are you doing this?" I lowered my veil, letting him see my face for the first time. "Because he destroyed my life once," I said. "And I will not let him do it again." The look of recognition that crossed Zhao Wei's face was almost satisfying. He knew who I was now. He knew I was Li Chen's wife. And he knew that I was not a woman to be trifled with. "You have a deal," he said. "Now tell me everything." And so I did. I told him about the ledger, about the bribes, about the conspiracy against Consort Lu. I told him about Li Chen's plans to frame me, about his cruelty, about the web of corruption he had woven around himself. I held nothing back. By the time I finished speaking, the sun had set, and the temple fair was winding down. Zhao Wei looked at me with something like respect in his eyes. "Your husband is a fool," he said. "Not because he is corrupt, there are many corrupt men in this court. But because he made an enemy of you." I smiled, a cold, hard smile. "He made an enemy of himself," I said. "I am merely the messenger of his destruction." As I walked away from the temple fair, I felt a strange sense of peace. The pieces were in place. The trap was set. All I had to do was wait for Li Chen to walk into it. But I knew that waiting was the most dangerous part of all. Li Chen was unpredictable. He was desperate. And a desperate man was capable of anything. The night was dark, the streets empty, and the weight of the ledger in my sleeve was a constant reminder of the war I had just declared. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. I quickened my pace, my heart racing. I had escaped the manor, but I had not escaped the danger. The hunt was still on. And this time, I was not the only one hunting. The days that followed my meeting with Zhao Wei passed in a blur of careful preparation. I worked for Madame Su during the daylight hours, organizing her correspondence and managing her estate records with a precision that earned her quiet approval. But at night I planned. I studied the ledger until I knew every name, every date, every amount by heart. I memorized the web of corruption that Li Chen had spun, and I began to see the threads that could be pulled to unravel it. Zhao Wei kept his promise. He did not mention my name to anyone, and he moved with a caution that I admired. He began to investigate Li Chen's activities, gathering evidence from his own sources, corroborating the information I had given him. The trap was tightening, but Li Chen seemed oblivious. He was too busy plotting his revenge against me. I heard the rumors through the servants' gossip. Li Chen had filed his complaint with the Ministry of Justice. He had accused me of embezzlement, of selling family heirlooms, of defaming his name. He had produced witnesses who swore they had seen me taking gold from the household treasury. The case was being reviewed, and an arrest warrant was expected to be issued within the week. The news sent a chill down my spine, but I did not panic. I had anticipated this. I had prepared for it. I had already sent copies of the ledger to 3 trusted locations, one with Madame Sue, one with a merchant in the south who owed me a debt, and one hidden in a safe deposit box in a bank near the Eastern Market. If anything happened to me, Li Chen's secrets would be exposed. But I did not want to rely on a dead man's switch. I wanted to live. I wanted to see Li Chen fall with my own eyes. And that meant I needed to stay alive long enough to see it happen. I sought out Huar one evening in the servants' quarters of Madame Sue's villa. She was mending a torn sleeve, her fingers moving with practiced ease. When she saw me, she set down her needle and looked at me with concern. My lady, you look tired, she said. You have not been sleeping. I cannot sleep, I admitted, sitting down beside her. Li Chen is moving faster than I expected. He has filed a complaint against me. The Ministry of Justice is reviewing it. Huar's face paled. What are you going to do? I am going to fight back, I said. But I need your help. I need you to deliver a message to a man named Zhao Wei, the Minister of Rights. He is my ally in this, but I cannot risk being seen with him again. It is too dangerous. Huar nodded without hesitation. Tell me what to say. I gave her a sealed letter addressed to Zhao Wei. It contained a warning. Li Chen was planning to destroy the evidence. He had learned, somehow, that someone was investigating him. He was going to burn his records, eliminate his witnesses, and make himself untouchable. If Zhao Wei wanted to catch him, he had to act quickly. Huar took the letter and left that night, her small figure disappearing into the darkness. I watched her go, my heart heavy with fear. I had sent her into danger, and I could not follow. I had to trust her, trust that she would succeed, trust that she would not be caught. The hours that followed were the longest of my life. I paced my chamber, my mind racing with possibilities. What if Huar was caught? What if the letter was intercepted? What if Zhao Wei refused to act? What if Li Chen struck first? And then, in the dead of night, I heard a commotion in the courtyard. I rushed to the window and saw a group of armed men entering Madame Sue's villa. At their head was Zhang, Li Chen's steward, his weasel face twisted with triumph. By order of the Ministry of Justice, Zhang announced, his voice carrying through the silent night, Lady Jing is to be arrested on charges of embezzlement and defamation. Resistance will be met with force. My blood turned to ice. They had come for me. They had come to drag me away to a prison cell, to strip me of my dignity, to break me as Li Chen had promised. But I was not the same woman who had cowered before him. I was not the same woman who had died in a ditch. I grabbed the hidden copy of the ledger that I kept in my room and ran out into the courtyard. Madame Sue was there, her face a mask of fury, standing between the armed men and my chamber. Dowager Countess, Zhang said, his voice oily and insincere. I am sorry to disturb your household, but we have a warrant for Lady Jing's arrest. Please step aside. She is under my protection, Madame Sue said, her voice cold and hard. She is a valuable member of my household. You cannot simply walk in here and drag her away without cause. We have cause, Zhang said, holding up a scroll. A formal complaint from her husband. Witnesses. Evidence. The Ministry of Justice has approved the arrest. I stepped forward, the ledger tucked into my sleeve. I will come quietly, I said, my voice steady despite the fear that clawed at my chest. But I want it known that I am innocent. And I want it known that I will fight these charges. Zhang sneered. You will have your chance in court, he said. Now come. Do not make this more difficult than it needs to be. I walked toward him, my head held high. Madame Sue reached out and grasped my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. Child, she whispered, are you sure about this? I am sure, I said. Li Chen has made a mistake. He has given me exactly what I need to destroy him. The court will see the truth. I trust in that. I did not tell her about Zhao Wei. I did not tell her about the trap that was already in motion. I did not tell her that I was walking into the prison cell willingly, knowing that it would be the very thing that sealed Li Chen's fate. The arrest was swift and efficient. I was taken to a small, cold cell in the Ministry of Justice, my hands bound with rope, my dignity stripped away. The guards threw me onto a straw mattress and locked the door behind me. I was alone in the darkness, the weight of the ledger pressing against my chest. I had not been searched. The guards had been careless, or perhaps they had been bribed. Either way, I still had the evidence I needed. I still had the weapon I could use to fight back. The trial was set for the next morning. I spent the night in the cold cell, my body trembling, my mind racing. I had no way of knowing if Huar had delivered the letter. I had no way of knowing if Zhao Wei would act. I had to trust in the plan I had set in motion, trust that the pieces would fall into place. When dawn broke, I was led into the courtroom. It was a grand hall, filled with officials and clerks, their faces cold and indifferent. At the center of the room sat the judge, a stern-looking man with a white beard and eyes like flint. And in the corner, watching me with a satisfied smirk, stood Li Chen. He looked triumphant. He had dressed in his finest robes, his hair carefully styled, his posture radiating confidence. He had been waiting for this moment, dreaming of it, planning for it. He wanted to see me broken, humiliated, destroyed. Lady Jing, the judge intoned, you have been accused of embezzling household funds, selling family heirlooms without permission, and defaming your husband's name. How do you plead? Not guilty, I said, my voice ringing clear. The courtroom stirred. Li Chen's smirk faltered. He had expected me to cower, to beg, to grovel for mercy. He had not expected defiance. Not guilty, the judge repeated. You deny the charges, I deny them completely, I said. And I have evidence to prove my innocence. Evidence that will show that my husband is the one who has been stealing from his own household. Evidence that will show that he is not the victim of this crime, he is the perpetrator. Li Chen's face went pale. He stepped forward, his voice shaking. She lies. She is trying to distract the court with false accusations. She is desperate and will say anything to save herself. Let her speak, the judge said, his voice calm but commanding. Lady Jing, present your evidence. I reached into my sleeve and pulled out the leather ledger. It was worn, its pages dog-eared and stained, but it was the most powerful weapon I had ever held. I held it up for the court to see. This ledger contains a record of every bribe Li Chen has paid, every official he has corrupted, every coin he has stolen from the state treasury, I said. The names and dates are all here. I asked the court to verify the authenticity of this document and to see the truth for themselves. The judge motioned for a clerk to take the ledger. The room fell silent as the clerk flipped through the pages, his face growing paler with each turn. Li Chen stood frozen, his hands trembling, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. And then, the doors of the courtroom burst open. Zhao Wei strode in, his presence commanding immediate attention. He was followed by a group of senior officials, their faces grim. At the center of the group was the chief eunuch, a man whose influence rivaled that of the emperor himself. What is the meaning of this? The judge demanded. Zhao Wei stepped forward, his gaze locked on Li Chen. I am here to bring charges of corruption against Minister Li, he said. We have uncovered a plot to defraud the state, to bribe officials, and to undermine the authority of the emperor. Lady Jing's ledger is only one piece of the evidence. We have more. Much more. Li Chen's legs buckled beneath him. He collapsed to the floor, his face a mask of terror. This is a conspiracy, he screamed. They have plotted against me. She has plotted against me. But no one was listening. The room erupted in chaos as officials scrambled to distance themselves from him. The judge called for order, but it was too late. Li Chen's fate was sealed. I watched him fall, watched the despair and rage twist his features, and I felt nothing. No triumph. No satisfaction. Only a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. The guards dragged Li Chen out of the courtroom, his screams echoing through the halls. As he was led past me, he turned to look at me, his eyes burning with hatred. "You will regret this," he hissed. "You will regret everything." "No, I won't," I said, my voice soft but firm. "I lived my entire life regretting the moment I met you. I will not waste another breath on your memory." He was dragged away, his protests fading into the distance. I walked out of the courtroom a free woman, the weight of the past lifting from my shoulders. The sun was bright in the sky, the air fresh and clean. It was a new day. It was a new life. And yet, as I looked at the faces of the people around me, I wondered if it was truly over. Li Chen was gone, but his influence lingered. The officials he had corrupted were still in power, their positions intact. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that they would not forget the woman who had brought one of their own to ruin. I was free, but I was not safe. The game was far from over. The silence of the courtroom followed me like a ghost as I stepped into the sunlight. The air outside was crisp, carrying the faint scent of plum blossoms from the gardens beyond the Ministry of Justice. I had expected to feel triumph, to feel the sweet release of victory. Instead, I felt hollow, as if the battle had drained something essential from me. The man who had destroyed my past life was gone, stripped of his titles, his wealth, his freedom. But the world he had built around himself remained, and I was still standing in the middle of it. Zhao Wei caught up with me as I reached the courtyard gates. His footsteps were quick and purposeful, his expression unreadable. "Lady Jing," he called out. "Wait." I turned to face him, shielding my eyes from the sun. The Minister of Rights looked younger than he had in my past life, less burdened by the weight of his ambitions. But his eyes were sharp, missing nothing. "I wanted to thank you," he said, stopping a few feet away. "The evidence you provided was more than enough to secure Li Chen's conviction. The court will be reviewing his case for weeks, possibly months. You have done the state a great service." "Thank you is not necessary, Minister," I said. "I did what I had to do." "And what will you do now?" he asked. "Your husband is exiled. Your marriage is dissolved. You are a free woman, but freedom does not always mean safety. Li Chen's allies will be watching you. They will wonder what else you know." I had already considered this. The ledger I had given to the court was only a partial record. I had kept copies of the most sensitive information, the names of officials who had accepted bribes, the dates of secret meetings, the details of plots that reached into the highest echelons of power. I had not revealed everything. I had been careful. "I will continue my work with Madame Su," I said. "I have found a place in her household, and I intend to keep it. As for Li Chen's allies, they have their own problems to worry about now. Their network is compromised. They will be too busy covering their tracks to come after me." Zhao Wei studied me for a long moment, his gaze penetrating. "You are a clever woman," he said. "But cleverness is not always enough. If you ever need protection, if you ever find yourself in danger, you can come to me. I owe you a debt, and I do not forget my debts." I inclined my head in acknowledgement. "I will remember that, Minister." We parted ways at the gates. I walked through the streets of the capital, my steps slow and deliberate. The city was bustling with activity, merchants hawking their wares, children chasing each other through the crowds, officials hurrying to their duties. It was a world that had continued on without me during my exile, a world that had not noticed my suffering. It was a world I was determined to carve a place in. Madame Su received me with warm embraces and a feast that evening. She had worried about me during my arrest, and I could see the relief in her eyes as she served me tea and pressed food into my hands. "You are a brave girl," she said, patting my arm. "Braver than I was at your age. When I heard you had been taken to the ministry, I feared the worst. But you not only survived, you triumphed." "I had help," I said, thinking of Huar, of Zhao Wei, of the kindness that had found me in unexpected places. "Help is not the same as courage," Madame Su said firmly. "You walked into that courtroom knowing that your fate hung in the balance. You faced your enemies without flinching. That is courage, child. Never doubt it." I stayed at the villa for several weeks, settling into a routine that was both unfamiliar and comforting. I managed Madame Su's correspondence, negotiated disputes with neighboring estates, and began to rebuild my reputation. The gossips of the capital were relentless. They whispered about the woman who had destroyed her own husband, the woman who had dared to defy the rules of propriety. But they also spoke of her cleverness, her resilience, her refusal to be broken. The whispers reached my ears, but I did not let them trouble me. I had learned in my past life that the opinions of others were a cage. I had spent years trying to please Li Chen, to please society, to be the perfect wife. It had cost me everything. I would not make that mistake again. But as the days passed, I began to notice that I was being watched. It started with small things: a servant lingering too long in the corridor, a shadow moving in the garden at night, a letter delivered to Madame Su's villa that was addressed to me but contained nothing but blank paper. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the trauma of my past life had made me jumpy. But the feeling of being observed never went away. I mentioned it to Huar one evening as she helped me organize my papers. She frowned, setting down a stack of letters. "I have noticed it too, my lady," she said. "There is a man who has been loitering near the gates for the past 3 days. He claims to be a peddler, but he never tries to sell anything. He just watches." My blood ran cold. "Describe him." Huar described a tall man with a scarred face and a limp. I did not recognize the description, but I recognized the pattern. In my past life, Li Chen had employed agents to track me after my exile. He had sent men to watch me, to intimidate me, to remind me that I was never truly free. The same tactics were being used now, and I knew who was behind them. The next day, I went to find Jia Wei. I arrived at the Ministry of Rights with a letter of introduction from Madame Su. The clerks at the front gate were reluctant to let me in, but I had learned to be persistent. I waited in the reception hall for nearly an hour before Jia Wei appeared, his expression a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Lady Jing," he said, leading me to his private office. "This is an unexpected visit." "Is something wrong? I believe Li Chen's allies are watching me," I said, taking a seat across from him. "I have been followed for the past several days. I cannot prove it, but I am certain of it. They are waiting for something. I do not know what." Jia Wei listened carefully, his fingers drumming against the desk. "Li Chen was not the only corrupt official in this city," he said. "The ledger you provided has implicated several powerful men. They will be desperate to protect themselves, and they will see you as a threat. If you have more evidence, if they suspect you have more evidence, they will try to eliminate you." "Then what do?" I asked. "I cannot live my life in fear. I will not be caged again." "You need to make yourself untouchable," Jia Wei said. "You need allies who are more powerful than Li Chen's friends. And you need to show the court that you are not a liability, you are an asset." He paused, studying me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "I have a proposal for you," he said. "It is not without risk, but it could solve your problem." "Go on." "There is a trade delegation being sent to the northern tribes," he said. "The emperor wants to negotiate a new treaty, but the tribes are unpredictable. The delegation needs someone with diplomatic skills, someone who can think quickly and navigate dangerous situations. I have recommended you for the position." I stared at him, stunned. "You want me to travel to the northern territories?" "I want you to have a reason to be indispensable to the court," he said. "If you succeed, you will have the emperor's gratitude. You will have a title, a position, and protection that no petty official can threaten. If you fail," he shrugged, "you will be far from the capital, far from Li Chen's allies, far from the men who want to silence you. Either way, you will be safer than you are here." It was a bold plan. Reckless, even. But I could see the logic in it. The northern tribes were dangerous, but they were also pragmatic. They valued strength and intelligence, qualities I had in abundance. If I could negotiate a favorable treaty, I would secure my place in the court. I would no longer be a vulnerable woman clinging to the edges of society. "I will do it," I said. "Tell me what I need to prepare." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. I studied maps and treaties, learned the customs of the northern tribes, and practiced negotiation strategies with Jia Wei's advisors. Madame Su was supportive but worried, pressing extra supplies into my hands and making me promise to write to her regularly. Huar insisted on coming with me. I tried to refuse, but she was stubborn. I will not let you face the wilderness alone, my lady, she said. Where you go, I go. I could not argue with her. I had tried to protect her in my past life, and it had cost her everything. This time, I would keep her close. This time, I would not let her slip away. The journey to the Northern Territories took a month. It was cold and arduous, the roads rough, and the weather unforgiving. But I did not complain. Each mile we traveled was a mile farther from the capital, a mile farther from the men who wanted to hurt me. I felt the chains of my past life falling away, one by one, as we moved deeper into the wilderness. The tribesmen we encountered were wary but not hostile. They had learned to distrust the emperor's envoys, who had broken promises and failed to honor treaties. I approached them with honesty and respect, speaking their language with the help of an interpreter, offering gifts that were modest but meaningful. The leader of the delegation was a man named Elder Khan, a grizzled warrior with a missing eye and a voice like gravel. He listened to me speak, his gaze steady and unblinking, and when I finished, he laughed. You are not like the others, he said. They come with gold and arrogance. You come with nothing but words. But your words are good. I trust your words. The treaty we negotiated was a success. I secured a peace agreement that would protect the northern border and open trade routes between the tribes and the empire. Elder Khan and I parted as allies, and I returned to the capital with a sense of accomplishment that I had not felt in 2 lifetimes. The emperor received me at the palace, his youthful face alight with approval. He praised my diplomacy, my courage, my dedication to the empire. He granted me a title, Lady of the Northern Peace, and a generous stipend. I was no longer a ruined woman. I was a heroine. But as I stood in the throne room, basking in the emperor's praise, I saw a familiar face among the assembled officials. It was Zhang, Li Chen's former steward. He had escaped the purge that had followed Li Chen's conviction, and he was watching me with a smile that did not reach his eyes. I had won the battle, but the war was not over. The men who had supported Li Chen were still in power, and they had not forgotten me. I had made myself indispensable, but I had also made myself a target. That night, as I walked through the palace gardens, I felt the weight of their eyes on me again. I quickened my pace, my heart pounding. The shadows were deep, the paths unfamiliar. I was alone, surrounded by enemies who knew exactly where to find me. And then, I saw him. Zhao Wei stood at the end of the path, his silhouette illuminated by the faint light of the moon. He was waiting for me, his expression grave. We need to talk, he said. The men who killed Li Chen's career are the same men who are plotting against you. They are preparing to strike. We do not have much time. I walked toward him, the cool night air brushing against my face. Tell me everything, I said. He did. The night air was cold against my skin as Zhao Wei led me away from the palace gardens and into a small, secluded pavilion. The moon hung low and pale, casting long shadows across the stone pathways. My heart had not stopped racing since I had seen Zhang's face in the throne room, and now, standing in the darkness with Zhao Wei's grave expression before me, I knew that my instincts had not betrayed me. Tell me everything, I repeated, my voice steady despite the fear that coiled in my chest. Zhao Wei glanced around the pavilion, ensuring we were alone, before turning to face me. Li Chen's conviction did not end his network, he said. It only scattered it. The men who profited from his corruption are still in place, and they have been watching you since the trial. They know you possess more evidence than what you presented in court. They know you have copies of the ledger. I do, I admitted. I kept the most sensitive pages. The names of officials who accepted bribes, the dates of secret meetings, the details of plots against the Empress Dowager's faction. I have them hidden in a safe location. Then you are a target, Zhao Wei said flatly. They cannot risk you revealing what you know. Zhang has been their messenger. He has been meeting with a group of senior officials who are desperate to protect themselves. They are planning to have you arrested on false charges, just as Li Chen did. Only this time, they will not give you a trial. They will have you executed before you can speak a word. The words hit me like a physical blow. I had known I was in danger, but I had not realized the extent of it. These men were not content to strip me of my titles or exile me to the provinces. They wanted me dead. How did you learn of this? I asked. I have spies of my own, Zhao Wei said. And I have cultivated relationships with servants who are loyal to me. One of them overheard Zhang discussing the plot with a senior official in the Ministry of War. They are moving quickly. I estimate they will make their move within the week. I forced myself to breathe, to think. Panic would not save me. I had survived 2 lifetimes, and I would not let a group of corrupt officials end me now. What do you recommend? I asked. Zhao Wei studied me for a moment, his expression unreadable. You have options, he said. You could flee the capital. You have the resources and the connections to disappear. But you would be running for the rest of your life, always looking over your shoulder. Or you could fight back. Fight back how? By exposing them before they can expose you, he said. You have the evidence. You have the names. You have the support of the emperor, who praised you publicly today. If you go to him directly and present the full extent of the conspiracy, he will have no choice but to act. The emperor despises corruption, and he is young enough to be swayed by a compelling argument. I considered his words. The emperor had been kind to me, but he was also surrounded by advisors who had their own agendas. If I went to him with accusations against his officials, I would need irrefutable proof. And I would need to be prepared for the possibility that some of those officials were closer to him than I realized. I will need to gather the copies of the ledger, I said. They are hidden in 3 locations. One with Madame Su, one with a merchant in the south, and one in a bank near the eastern market. It will take time to retrieve them. Then we must move quickly, Zhao Wei said. I will arrange for you to have an audience with the emperor in 3 days' time. That gives us 72 hours to gather everything we need. The plan was risky, but it was also our best chance. I nodded, my resolve hardening. I will do it. But I will need your help. I will need protection. If Zhang's allies know that I am moving against them, they will not hesitate to strike before I can act. Zhao Wei inclined his head. You will have it. I will assign my most trusted guards to accompany you. They will not leave your side until the emperor has heard your testimony. We parted ways at the pavilion, and I returned to Madame Su's villa under the cover of darkness. The streets were empty, the silence oppressive. I felt the weight of unseen eyes on me, but I did not look back. I could not afford to show fear. The next morning, I began my preparations. I sent Huar to retrieve the copy of the ledger from Madame Su, and I dispatched 2 of Zhao Wei's guards to the southern merchant and the eastern bank. The wait was agonizing. Every creak of the floorboards, every murmur of conversation in the courtyard, set my nerves on edge. Huar returned first, the ledger safely in her possession. She placed it in my hands with trembling fingers, her face pale with worry. My lady, she said, there is something I must tell you. When I was at Madame Su's villa, I overheard the servants speaking. Zhang has been seen in the neighborhood. He is watching the villa. I felt a chill run down my spine. Zhang was not a patient man. If he suspected that I was gathering evidence against him, he would act quickly. We need to leave, I said. Now. We cannot stay here any longer. I gathered my belongings and prepared to move to a safe house that Zhao Wei had arranged. But before I could leave, a knock sounded at the door. My heart seized. I motioned for Huar to stay back and approached the door cautiously. It was not Zhang. It was one of Zhao Wei's guards, his face flushed with exertion. My lady, he said, I have urgent news. The men you sent to the eastern bank have been attacked. They are dead. The ledger has been stolen. The world seemed to tilt beneath my feet. I gripped the doorframe to steady myself. And the southern merchant. We have not heard from him, the guard said. We fear the worst. My mind raced. Zhang and his allies were moving faster than I had anticipated. They had already intercepted 2 of my copies. Only one remained, the one I held in my hands, the one Huar had just retrieved from Madame Su. We need to go to the emperor now, I said. I cannot wait 3 days. Zhang will have me killed before then. The guard nodded. Minister Zhao anticipated this. He has arranged for you to be brought to the palace immediately. He will meet you at the side gate. I grabbed the ledger and followed the guard out of the villa. Huar was close behind me, her hand clutching my sleeve. The streets were still quiet, but I could feel the danger closing in around us. Every shadow seemed to move, every sound was a threat. We reached the palace side gate without incident. Zhao Wei was waiting for us, his expression tense. The emperor has agreed to see you, he said. But we must move quickly. Zhang has informants everywhere. If he learns that you are meeting with the emperor, He will try to stop you. I followed Zhao Wei through a maze of corridors, my heart pounding in my ears. The palace was vast and labyrinthine, and I had never been to this part of it before. I trusted Zhao Wei to lead me, but I could not shake the feeling that we were being followed. And then, as we rounded a corner, I saw them. Zhang was standing at the end of the corridor, flanked by a dozen armed men. His face was twisted with triumph, his weasel eyes gleaming with malice. Lady Jing, he said, his voice echoing through the empty hallway. I was hoping to catch you before you reached the Emperor. It seems I have arrived just in time. I stopped in my tracks, my hand instinctively moving to the ledger hidden in my sleeve. Zhao Wei stepped forward, positioning himself between me and Zhang. Step aside, Zhao Wei said, his voice cold and commanding. This woman has an audience with the Emperor. You have no authority to stop her. I have every authority, Zhang said, producing a scroll from his robe. I have a warrant for Lady Jing's arrest, signed by the Minister of Justice himself. She is to be taken into custody immediately on charges of conspiracy against the state. I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. Conspiracy? I am the one who exposed corruption in the court. I am the one who negotiated a treaty with the northern tribes. I am the one the Emperor himself praised. And you dare to accuse me of conspiracy? You are a clever woman, Zhang said, his smile widening. But cleverness will not save you. The Minister of Justice is one of us. The warrant is valid. Your accusations will be dismissed as the ravings of a jealous wife. And you will be executed before the end of the week. The guards moved forward, their hands reaching for me. Zhao Wei drew his sword, his face a mask of fury. You will not touch her, he said. I will not allow it. Minister Zhang said, his voice dripping with mockery. You are outnumbered. Put down your sword, and I will see that you are treated leniently. Continue to resist, and you will share her fate. For a moment, I thought Zhao Wei would fight. His grip on his sword tightened, and I could see the conflict in his eyes. But he was outnumbered, and he knew it. If he fought, he would die, and I would still be taken. Zhao Wei, I said, my voice soft. Do not sacrifice yourself for me. I will not let you. He looked at me, his expression anguished. I made you a promise. I said I would protect you. And you have, I said. But this is not the end. I still have the ledger. I still have the evidence. They can arrest me, but they cannot silence me if I am not afraid. I stepped forward, my head held high. Jing's guards surrounded me, their hands rough as they seized my arms. I did not resist. I let them take me, my gaze locked on Zhang's smug face. You think you have won, I said. But you have made a mistake. You have given me a chance to speak directly to the Emperor. And I will take it. Zhang's smile faltered. What are you talking about? I reached into my sleeve and pulled out the ledger, holding it up for all to see. This is the full record of your conspiracy, I said. Every bribe, every plot, every betrayal. And it is not the only copy. I have already sent word to the Emperor's chief eunuch. He is waiting for me in the throne room. If I do not arrive within the hour, he will release the information to the entire court. Zhang's face went pale. You are lying. Am I said. You have never known me to lie, Zhang. I have always been honest about my intentions. And my intention is to see you destroyed. The guards hesitated, their grip loosening. Zhang looked from me to Zhao Wei, his confidence crumbling. He had expected me to cower, to beg, to scream for mercy. He had not expected me to fight back. Take her to the cells, he said, his voice shaking. Now. But it was too late. The sound of footsteps echoed through the corridor, and a group of imperial guards appeared at the end of the hall. At their head was the chief eunuch, his robes immaculate, his expression unreadable. The Emperor requests Lady Jing's presence, he said, his voice carrying an authority that silenced the room. You are all to escort her to the throne room. Zhang's face contorted with rage, but he could not refuse. The Emperor's command was absolute. He stepped aside, his eyes burning with hatred. This is not over, he hissed as I walked past him. No, I said, meeting his gaze. It is not. But you will be. Soon. I walked into the throne room with my head held high, the ledger clutched to my chest. The Emperor was seated on his golden throne, his expression curious. The room was filled with officials, their faces a mixture of surprise and suspicion. I knelt before him, my voice clear and steady. "Your Majesty," I said, "I come with evidence of a conspiracy that reaches into the highest levels of your court. I ask only for the chance to speak the truth." The Emperor leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with interest. "Speak," he said, and I did. I told him everything. I named the names, I listed the crimes, I laid the evidence before him. The room erupted in chaos as officials scrambled to defend themselves, but I did not stop. I spoke until my voice was hoarse, until the last piece of evidence had been presented. When I finished, the Emperor was silent. The room was silent. And then, slowly, he rose from his throne. "Arrest them," he said, pointing to the officials I had named. "All of them. And send for the Minister of Justice. He has some questions to answer." The guards moved swiftly, dragging the accused out of the throne room. Zhang was among them, his face a mask of despair. He looked at me as he was led past, his eyes filled with a hatred that would follow me even in death. But I did not flinch. I watched him go, and I felt nothing but relief. The Emperor turned to me, his expression softening. "You have done the Empire a great service, Lady Jing," he said. "You have exposed a conspiracy that could have destroyed us all. I am in your debt." I bowed my head, my heart heavy with exhaustion. "I only did what was right, Your Majesty." The aftermath of the trial was swift and brutal. The officials I had exposed were stripped of their titles and executed. Their properties were seized, their families disgraced. The Minister of Justice was found guilty of corruption and sent into exile. Zhang was executed within the week, his body left to rot in the public square as a warning to others. I watched his execution from a distance, my face hidden behind a veil. I felt no satisfaction, no triumph. Only a profound weariness that settled deep in my bones. The Emperor rewarded me generously. He granted me a title, a pension, and a position in his court as an advisor on diplomatic affairs. I was no longer a vulnerable woman clinging to the edges of society. I was a force to be reckoned with, a woman who had brought down a conspiracy and emerged victorious. But even as I accepted his praise, I knew that the scars of my past life would never fully heal. I had been betrayed, humiliated, and left to die. I had survived, but I had not escaped the memories. They followed me like shadows, a constant reminder of what I had lost. I returned to Madame Sue's villa that evening, my steps slow and heavy. Hua was waiting for me, her eyes red with tears. "My lady," she said, embracing me. "It is over. It is finally over." I held her close, feeling the warmth of her body against mine. "Yes," I said. "It is over." But as I looked out the window at the moonlit sky, I knew that my journey was not complete. I had won my freedom, but I had not yet found my purpose. I had survived, but I had not yet truly lived. I had to find a reason to live. Not just to survive, but to thrive. That night, I made a decision. I would not let my past define me. I would not let the betrayals and the suffering dictate my future. I would build a new life, a life of my own making. I would use my skills, my intelligence, my resilience to carve a place for myself in this world. And I would do it without fear. The weeks that followed the executions were strange and hollow. I had expected to feel relief, to feel the weight of my past finally lift from my shoulders. Instead, I felt adrift, like a boat that had lost its anchor. The Emperor had given me a title and a position, but the palace was a labyrinth of whispered conspiracies, and I was not sure I wanted to navigate it alone. Zhao Wei came to visit me at Madame Sue's villa one afternoon. His face was drawn, shadows beneath his eyes, but he managed a small smile when he saw me. "You have become a legend in the capital," he said, taking a seat across from me in the garden. "They are calling you the woman who brought down a conspiracy. The court gossips have been busy." "Let them talk," I said. "I have learned not to care what they say." "Wise," he said. "But I did not come here to discuss the gossips. I came to offer you something." I raised an eyebrow. "What kind of something?" "A partnership," he said. "I have been appointed to lead a new department focused on reforming the civil service. The Emperor wants to root out corruption and ensure that appointments are based on merit, not bribes. It is a massive undertaking, and I cannot do it alone." I need someone with your intelligence, your experience, and your ruthlessness. I stared at him, surprised. You want me to work for you, I want you to work with me, he corrected. As an equal. Not as a subordinate. I have seen what you are capable of, and I know that you would be an asset to this effort. The Emperor has already approved the idea. The only question is whether you will accept. It was an unexpected offer, but not an unwelcome one. I had been looking for a purpose, a reason to move forward. This could be a dot, I will accept, I said. On one condition. Name it. I want to be able to make my own decisions, I said. I will not be a puppet. If I see something that needs to be done, I will do it, with or without your permission. Zhao Wei smiled. I would expect nothing less. And so began a new chapter in my life. I threw myself into the work, determined to make a difference. The department was a mess of rivalries and bureaucratic inefficiency, but I had faced worse. I used every skill I had learned in my past life, the diplomacy, the negotiation, the ability to read people and anticipate their moves. I built alliances, brokered compromises, and exposed corruption wherever I found it. The work was exhausting, but it was also fulfilling. For the first time in 2 lifetimes, I felt like I was building something meaningful. I was not just surviving. I was making a difference, but not everyone was happy with my success. I had made enemies during the trials, and they had not forgotten me. They watched me from the shadows, waiting for an opportunity to strike. The first sign of trouble came in the form of a letter. It was delivered to my chambers one evening, sealed with a symbol I did not recognize. I opened it cautiously, my heart pounding. The letter was short and to the point. It contained a list of names, officials who had been involved in Li Chen's conspiracy but had escaped punishment. And it contained a warning. Those officials were plotting to assassinate me. I read the letter 3 times, my hands trembling. The names were familiar. They were men I had been investigating, men I had suspected of continuing Li Chen's work. And now they knew that I was a threat to them. I went to Zhao Wei immediately. He read the letter in silence, his face growing darker with each line. This is serious, he said. These men are powerful. They have allies in the palace and in the military. If they are plotting against you, they will not hesitate to strike. Then we need to strike first, I said. We need to expose them before they can act. Zhao Wei nodded. I agree. But we will need more evidence. The letter is anonymous. We cannot act on it alone. I spent the next few days gathering evidence, working tirelessly to build a case against the conspirators. I interviewed witnesses, searched through records, and tracked the movement of funds. It was slow, painstaking work, but I was determined to see it through. And then, one night, I was ambushed. I was returning to my chambers late, the corridors of the palace empty and silent. I had been working with Zhao Wei, reviewing documents and planning our next move. I was tired, my mind clouded with exhaustion, and I did not notice the shadows moving behind me. The first blow caught me off guard. A hand clamped over my mouth, and I was dragged into a side room. I struggled, kicking and clawing, but my attacker was stronger than me. I was thrown to the ground, the breath knocked out of my lungs. I looked up and saw a face I recognized, one of the officials from Li Chen's network. His eyes were cold, his lips twisted into a sneer. You should have stayed out of our affairs, Lady Jing, he said. You should have been satisfied with your victory. But you could not leave well enough alone, could you? I scrambled to my feet, my heart racing. You will not get away with this, I said. The Emperor will find out. Zhao Wei will find out. You will be executed. He laughed. By the time they find your body, we will be long gone. We have allies in the military. We have escape routes planned. You are not the only one who can plan ahead. I looked around the room, searching for a weapon, an escape route, anything. But there was nothing. I was trapped. And then, the door burst open. Zhao Wei stood in the doorway, his sword drawn. Behind him were a dozen Imperial guards, their faces grim. The official's face went white with shock. Seize him, Zhao Wei said, his voice cold and commanding. And search the building. There may be others. The guards moved quickly, subduing the official and dragging him away. I stood in the corner of the room, my body trembling, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Zhao Wei crossed the room and took my hands in his. Are you all right? He asked, his voice filled with concern. I am fine, I said, though my voice was shaky. How did you know I was following you? He admitted. I had a feeling something was wrong. I am glad I trusted my instincts. I looked at him, this man who had become my ally, my partner, my friend. He had saved my life, risked his own to protect me. And I realized in that moment that I was no longer alone. The plot to assassinate me was exposed, and the conspirators were arrested and executed. The purge was swift and brutal, but I did not mourn them. They had tried to kill me, and they had failed. I had survived, as I always did. But the experience had changed me. I had spent so much time fighting, surviving, clawing my way back from the brink of death. I had forgotten what it meant to live. I had forgotten what it meant to be happy. I found myself spending more time with Zhao Wei, our professional relationship deepening into something more. He was kind and patient, his intelligence matched only by his integrity. He did not try to control me or diminish me. He respected me, valued me, saw me as an equal. We were working late one evening, the candles burning low, when he finally spoke. I have been thinking, he said, setting down his brush. About the future. About what comes next. What do you mean? I asked. I mean that the work we are doing is important, he said. But there is more to life than work. I want to build a future with you. Not just as partners in this department, but as partners in life. I stared at him, stunned. You are proposing? I am, he said, his voice steady. I know that you have been hurt. I know that you have been betrayed. But I am not Li Chen. I will never be Li Chen. I will never blame you for my failures or take credit for your successes. I will never try to cage you or control you. I want to walk beside you, not ahead of you. Tears filled my eyes. I had never expected to find love again. I had been so consumed by my pain, my anger, my need for revenge, that I had closed myself off to the possibility of happiness. But here was this man, offering me a future. Yes, I said, my voice breaking. I will marry you. Zhao Wei smiled, a radiant smile that lit up his entire face. He pulled me into his arms, holding me close, and I felt a peace that I had not known in 2 lifetimes. Our wedding was a small affair, attended by only a few close friends and allies. Madame Su wept with joy, pressing my hands and telling me that my mother would have been proud. Huar stood beside me, her eyes bright with tears, her smile wide and unguarded. The emperor himself sent a gift, a jade pendant engraved with the symbol of the phoenix. It was a gesture of respect, a sign that I had finally earned my place in the world. As I stood beside Zhao Wei, exchanging our vows, I felt the ghosts of my past finally begin to fade. The pain, the betrayal, the bitterness, they were still there, a part of me that could never be erased. But they no longer defined me. I had moved beyond them. We settled into a quiet life together, our days filled with work and our evenings with shared laughter and quiet conversation. I continued my work in the department, using my skills to make a difference. Zhao Wei supported me, challenged me, and loved me in a way I had never thought possible. And slowly, I began to heal. I still thought about my past life, about the woman who had died in a ditch, abandoned and alone. But I no longer mourned her. She had been strong in her own way, enduring suffering that would have broken a lesser person. She had been the seed from which I had grown, the foundation on which I had built my new life. One evening, as I stood in the garden of our home, watching the sun set over the capital, I felt a hand on my shoulder. Zhao Wei stood beside me, his presence warm and reassuring. What are you thinking about? He asked. About the past, I said. About how far I have come. He nodded, understanding without needing an explanation. You have come a long way, he said. And you have done it on your own terms. I smiled, leaning into his embrace. I could not have done it without you. Perhaps, he said. But you would have found a way. You are the strongest person I have ever known. I looked out at the city, at the lights flickering in the windows, at the life that pulsed through the streets. I had been reborn into a world that had tried to destroy me, and I had not only survived, I had thrived. I was no longer the woman who fed a man's ambition. I was the woman who built her own. And that was enough.